Hello and welcome to our Universal Peace Federation webinar today. UPF is an international and interreligious network of individuals and organizations, including representatives from religion, government, civil society, and the private sector, dedicated to achieving world peace. An NGO in general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, UPF supports the work of the United Nations, particularly in the areas of interfaith peace building, peace education, and the strengthening of the family and the marriage. And our webinar today is sponsored by IMAP, which is the International Media Association for Peace, which is one of the associations of the Universal Peace Federation. And the International Media Association for Peace recognizes the vital role that journalists play in guarding against totalitarianism and supporting the expansion of freedom. IMAP represents a worldwide professional network of journalists who support a socially responsible and moral media to convey accurate content, address the challenges of our time based on the highest principles of ethical journalism, and understanding that universal values are key elements for a world of peace. The topic for our webinar today is Peace and Democracy in Africa. Are we at a crossroads? After 30 years of conflict in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo and an estimated 6 million victims of the conflict, are we at a crossroads? Is the United States brokered Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo peace deal opening new opportunities for peace and democracy? What role can governments, NGOs, and the media play to bring dignity and justice to the populations of the region and the continent as well? Our moderator today is Pierre Beauregard. Pierre earned his degree in business administration in 1982 at Haute Études Commerciales in Montreal, Canada. In 1989, he completed a master's in religious education at the Unification Theological Seminary. Since 2016, he has been volunteering as a facilitator to help men wanting to break free from addiction to pornography. In 2020, Pierre co-founded the informal group Canadians for Action, which advocates for age verification legislation in Canada. He lives with his wife near Montreal, Canada, and enjoys his retirement after a 20-year career as a certified financial planner with the Desjardins Group. Since 2021, Pierre has been the coordinator for IMAP in Canada. So welcome, Pierre.
Thank you for the introduction, Ray. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. As Ray mentioned, I'm based here in Montreal, Canada. Two of our speakers, Alfani and Edgar Bellow, are also based in Montreal. As for Nyembo Barwani, he will join us from his home in Africa. This webinar will be streaming live on the Facebook page and the YouTube channel of UPF USA. So please don't hesitate to share it. As Ray mentioned in his introduction, UPF supports interfaith peace building and promotes a moral media. Today, we are addressing the prospects of peace in the east of the DR.Congo. First, we will hear Alfani give us an overview of the situation in the region and an evaluation of the impact of the U.S. brokered peace deal. He'll be followed by Ambassador Nyembo Barwani, who will talk about the role of youth in finding solutions for sustainable peace. Finally, Dr. Bellow will give a response following their presentation, and we'll finish with a period of questions and discussion. Let me present our first speaker, Alfani. Professor Alfani is a Congolese scholar who teaches as a core fellow at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. He completed his PhD in religious studies and peace building at the University of Montreal, Canada, where he previously studied theology and biblical studies for his MA. He holds an executive MS degree in international affairs with specializations in foreign policy analysis from Seton Hall University. Professor Alfani current research projects explore the relation between religion and refugees and the nexus between religion and foreign policy. He was recently awarded the Collaborative National Endowment for Humanities grant to conduct a multi-sited study that will feature the voices of Congolese refugees, including returnees, who reside in multiple locations, US, Kenya, Uganda, and Burundi. Besides several publications in both French and English in referred journals, Professor Alfani is also an author of Religious Peace Building in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He just came back from Kinshasa, where he organized an international and interdisciplinary colloquium that gathered scholars from the DRC and several countries, including Cameroon, Canada, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa, and the US. Welcome, Dr. Alfani. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Pierre Beauregard. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your day or your afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. It is an honor to be invited again to share my thoughts and reflections about the ongoing and recurrent conflict and instability in the Great Lakes region of Africa. I would like again to express my gratitude to our moderator, Pierre Beauregard, and all his team for this kind invite and facilitation of this meeting. I'll be speaking about the ongoing conflict in the DRC in relation to the talks and recent agreements between different stakeholders in both Washington and Doha. In fact, the one in Doha was not signed. There's still hope that this will happen. After this presentation, I will perhaps propose some recommendations for a regional lasting peace. While I may not have the solution for this protected conflict, but as I have always thought, that the true collaborative efforts and solidarity, both locally and internationally, can contribute to alleviating the long suffering of local population. Talking about the ongoing conflict in the Congo matters for several reasons. What is actually happening in the Ituri, North and South Kivu provinces, or even in Congo in general, is not something that is new. The mainstream media may have selected or chosen to share what they think we as a general population ought to know, with perhaps the goal of controlling public opinion. However, it's hard for me or even any keen observer of Congolese history to isolate what is happening in the Congolese modern history from the 19th century violation of violence. There is, in my view, a continuity of violence in Congo and the Great Lakes region of Africa, which includes to some extent, countries like Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. In other words, violence towards Congolese local populations have been going on for over a century, or about 14 decades. It's not just about 30 years, but this has been happening for several decades. Violence and atrocity seem to have domiciled in the Congo and that region, and has in a way become banal, to borrow from Hannah Arendt's notion of banalization of evil. In other words, it is not just 3 decades of violence. It's over a century of violence and extreme violence in Congo and the region. What we are actually talking about has led to more than 10 million conflict-related deaths, and not even to mention about the millions of internally displaced population and refugees since the early 1990s. Some of the questions that I would like to raise that may appear to be provocative and would like to invite us to reflect upon are the following. Who are the main actors? Who profit from the ongoing conflict in Congo? In other words, what are the issues and interests that are at stake? What are the root causes of this protected conflict? And what are the driving forces of the ongoing conflict? Without understanding these questions, or at least reflecting upon them, we may actually patch what we may call peace, but is what I consider negative peace. So the complexity of the ongoing conflict in DRC is shaped by the interplay of multiple actors operating across various spheres of influence. Understanding the dynamics at play requires moving beyond a singular focus on domestic events and instead identifying and analyzing the contributions and roles of key actors at the national, regional, and international levels. Indeed, a multi-layers approach enables us to appreciate how governance structures, armed movements like Alliance du Fleuve Congo and March 23, AFC, M23, and civil society such as religious actors, and I'm referring right now largely to the Catholic and Église du Christ au Congo in Congo, within the DRC, and how they interact with regional stakeholders and international actors. This comprehensive perspective, in my view, is instrumental in unpacking the overlapping interests and alliances and interventions that both drive and mitigate the conflict. It is thus possible to distinguish at least three categories of key stakeholders or actors, each embedded within a specific environment. For instance, at the national level, we have the Congolese state, non-state armed groups, and civil society organizations, and of course, local populations that play critical and decisive roles in influencing in one way or another the outcome of the conflict itself. At the regional level, we have neighboring countries and regional organizations who frequently act as mediators, influencers, or at times direct participants in DRC's affairs. Among these include Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Kenya, Angola, East African Community, EAC, Southern African Development Community. And many of these actors are also found in the Washington Agreement and have tried, at best, try to resolve this conflict, but the conflict continues. Finally, at the international level, we have the engagement of great powers such as USA, Russia, China, international institutions such as the United Nations, African Union, MONUSCO, donor countries, multinational or corporation, who play an important role in shaping the contour of the conflict and prospect for peace. Not understanding the role of these multi-layers actors, we may actually miss the mark from my perspective. And therefore, it is critical to develop and have a clear understanding of these key actors operating at these three levels that I've underlined. So their interactions, interests, and interventions collectively shape the trajectory of events and the prospect for peace and stability in the region. And I will actually highlight this in my conclusion, especially when I bring in who were at the table when the peace agreement was dealt with and what is actually happening in Qatar. So I'll give just an example. Qatar's economic interest in the region, and particularly in Rwanda, where Qatar Airways has more than 60% equity stake in the airport project and 49% in Rwandair, explain its mediation diplomacy. And that's one of the questions that we need to understand. Why is it Qatar and the US so willing? Of course, they have the humanitarian mindset in trying to resolve this conflict, as some of those leaders have mentioned. But I think it's also important to highlight the economic factor that may lead to their involvement in what is actually happening. So while talks continue, another example is that we notice that there continue to be some agreements actually taking place in terms of mineral contracts, agreements with multinationals. I recently heard about Trinity Gold, Cabold, and other agreements that include illegal migrants that may be deported to Africa. And some of these countries that said that deal include Rwanda and Uganda. So we have all these issues that are going on while these agreements have been put in motion. So I will use two analytical frameworks that can help us at least understand the issues that trigger and maintain conflicts in that region in particular. And these two frameworks include greed and grievance models. It's not something that is new, but other scholars have actually put this forward. I'm thinking about Paul Collier in Breaking the Conflict Trap. So the greed model helps us at least to explain conflicts, wars, and unethical behavior driven by the pursuit of economic gain and the control of natural resources and wealth. In other words, the desire to increase one's wealth and power is the primary driver of certain actions. And I actually highlight this in my book, where I try to paint some of the root causes local populations were sharing with me in Goma diocese, in different religious meetings that I had in Goma. The second model is the grievance model. Conflict are primarily driven by perceived and historical injustices, inequalities, social grievances, and political oppression, rather than just a simple desire for material wealth or economic gain. So it's very important to combine these two models and in trying to understand what are the root causes or driving forces or factors of this particular conflict. So it is not just that the Congolese state is weak or collapsed, as some of actors or scholars or observers have mentioned, and that the Congolese state is actually struggling to provide goods and services to its population. But I also argue that it's important to highlight that neighboring states or other actors, domestic and international, continue to weaken the remainder of the Congolese state. I will conclude with these ideas when I come to my conclusion. So, since the 19th century, when King Leopold II, to recent Congolese history, violence and atrocity, as I mentioned, have domiciled in that nation, leading to millions of deaths and internally displaced and refugees populations. So this conceptual framework help us to kind of explain, and should not, and I don't want to the audience to get that understanding that it will justify those deaths. I'm not suggesting also that there were no forms of violence prior to both the Leopoldian or colonial periods. African historians will probably agree with me that King Leopold II's personal rule over Congo was one of the most horrible periods of the 19th century in Central Africa. So his personal rule over what was then known as Congo Free State and endorsed at the Belgian conference the Berlin conference in 1885, lasted until 1910, when the Belgian government took over what was personally owned by King Leopold II. And this actually rule led to the death of more than 10 million Congolese people as a result of violence, disease, and starvation. King Leopold II implemented an extractive approach that focused on the brutal exploitation of natural resources. We think about rubber and ivory. So that was the model that he put in place. And I would like to suggest that we kind of see the same model in the contemporary Congolese landscape. So his administration operated under a system designed to purely extract wealth from the colony with little to no investment in local development, while suggesting the Congolese population to extreme violence and forced labor. His administration and administrations that followed his, including in the post-colonial era, followed almost the same pattern of extraction. And I'm trying to, we can probably give a credit to the Washington Agreement to include the regional integration, which in some way has been tried before with the Eastern African Community, SADC, in order to create an environment where businesses and markets will be a means towards peace, what we call liberal peace. So the question I suspect you are probably asking yourself is, what could possibly explain or justify those atrocities? Or perhaps is it what is happening in the post-colonial Congolese states and in Eastern Congo the same? I contend that the developments in Congolese contemporary era, especially in the Eastern region, mirror, if not surpass in severity, earlier patterns of violence and upheaval. So these 3 decades following the collapse of the Mobutu regime, as well as the period beginning 3 years after the Rwandan genocide, have revealed striking similar patterns, and the patterns of violence, extraction, corruption, and the list goes on. I will probably draw to my conclusion by giving some thoughts on the Washington and Doha agreements. Will the ongoing talks and agreements in Washington and Doha lead to a different path, a path of lasting peace and prosperity for all? That's the hope for everyone, I suspect for the Congolese people as well, especially grassroots members. I would like to perhaps share a few thoughts about these agreements and conclude with some recommendations. In my view, these agreements emerge at a critical juncture, as the Congolese government has recently lost control over several key territory. I name some of them: Bunagana, Goma, Bukavu, and I also heard recently about Uvira. I wasn't following, but I have the impression that Uvira also fell under the control of these rebel groups that are backed by Rwanda. So a combination of internal and external factors has contributed to these territorial losses. Given the high risk of increased casualties among local populations, in my view, I think when I analyze this situation, a military solution has never, and in this case, is unlikely to be the primary course of action pursued by the Congolese government. So while this negotiation presents an opportunity for peace, and of course for different stakeholders that may enhance, and I'm thinking about these 2 rebel movements in particular, that may enhance their legitimacy, they simultaneously risk undermining the fragile democratic processes which relies on the principle of achieving power through free and fair elections. And that's my analysis to this, right? So we have this negotiation going on right now, but at the same time, we should not forget, and this is what I want to draw attention to, regardless of whether one agrees with President Tshisekedi, his administration, or entertains hypothetical questions regarding constitutional amendments, it is important to remember that the Congolese people exercise their democratic rights by electing him and his administration as president through the polls. This is very important to highlight, and I know it's a little bit slippery to make those kind of comments, but I think it's very important to bear that in mind. So this recurring conflict raises a second concern regarding the marginalization of the masses' voices. And I'm thinking notably to the local populations through their lack of direct participation at the negotiation tables in both Washington and Doha. We actually noticed that those who are at that particular negotiation table or those tables are leaders who are largely after positioning themselves for political gain and some probably immunity against possible justice processes. So while in Kinshasa, I was interviewed by local media regarding my views on the ongoing situation in the Eastern Congo and the related agreement that we are discussing right now. response remains consistent, and I will share what I mentioned a few weeks ago to this journalist. I believe it is essential to listen to the voiceless, the gang rape women that I've met in refugee camps, orphans that have left in places like Kakuma, Nyankanda, in some of these refugee camps where you can see the consequences of the conflict that is happening. The voices of these individuals are rarely heard. And I do think that those living in conflict zone and displaced areas and refugee camps, their voices truly matter. And it's very important to include their voices when we talk about lasting peace, and in this case that we are discussing about. Only when we begin to truly listen to these voices can we initiate the healing of deep-seated injustices and work towards rebuilding trust and lasting peace. I'm not against the peace that we are actually discussing, which I describe as negative peace. 30 years probably from now on, if we are not dealing with the root causes of these issues, we'll actually be talking about another negotiation, another mediation. May God forbid, and I hope that we can move beyond this negotiation and establish long-lasting peace in the region. So the third and last concern, and I will conclude with this, is the loss of trust in international laws and institutions, largely because of repeated violence of basic human rights, even when they were recognized by some such organs as the United Nations Security Council. I'm referring right now to the resolution 2723, if I recall. While the Washington Agreement and Doha talks have been hailed as historic milestones, offering a glimmer of hope, and I actually join those who are hoping for peace, I personally think I remain consciously skeptical, and I hope to be proven wrong. The conflict, however, may persist and even escalate, driven by continued impunity, the weakening of the Congolese state, and the enduring exploitative dynamics and extractive pattern surrounding the region's scarce natural resources. Thank you.
It was an amazing presentation, and I remember what struck me is about the banalization of violence, which is essentially what we've been experiencing over 30 years. So many people have died. And what struck me as well is that you talked about it, the figure of 10 million people died also in the time of the King Leopold period until 1910, I believe. And now you're drawing a parallel to a similar situation since the fall of Mobutu. And the peace is fraught with dangers. It's difficult because there tends to be greed, and that gets in. And I will remember the final comment that it's essential to listen to the voice of the voiceless. And I believe that I appreciate our next speaker, Ambassador Chris Nyembo, for having brought these voices to the fore, and in his contact with the youth, because you talked about the importance of something from the base that can rise from the base. So let me introduce our next speaker, Ambassador Chris Nyembo. He was born in Kinshasa. He studied 3 years in India, where he earned his Bachelor's of Business Administration at the University of Bangalore. He lived 3 years in India. How about that? He also completed an advanced training in diplomacy at the Diplomacy School of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Democratic Republic of Congo. His international exposure spans India, Thailand, Egypt, Libya, Zambia, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Australia, and Russia, shaping his perspective and strategic vision. Chris Nyembo currently serves as the regional director of the Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. He is also the founder and CEO of Synergie 243, a platform dedicated to youth empowerment, civic engagement, and sustainable development initiatives in the DRC. He's recognized among the top 10 of the 100 best young African leaders. He also holds the distinction of Doctor Honoris Causa. He's a peace ambassador of Universal Peace Federation and is active in international forums and conferences where he advocates for diplomacy, human rights, and the transformative role of African youth. Ambassador Chris Nyembo, you have the floor.
So, thank you, Mr. Pierre. I think that my English is not very fluent like Mr. Roger, but I will do my best. So, good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Special greeting to Mr. Pierre and Mr. Roger and Dr. Bellow. As you know, today I will speak about the role of the youth in the context of DRC. You must know that I'm not here today as an expert, but as a citizen, as a young Congolese and a living witness to the realities in the eastern part of my country. You must know that at the beginning of this year in Goma, I narrowly escaped death because I slept just meters away from falling shields. I saw fear in the eyes of children and heard streams in the streets. What our brothers and sisters in Goma, Bukavu, Beni, Ruchuru, and Bunia are experiencing is not abstract, but it's a hill. You know, from this painful experience, a deep conviction was born. Sustainable peace is only possible if we invest in people, especially in youth. You know, I have some inspiration from African and Asian, because last year, during my visit to Ogun State in Nigeria, I met the former president Olusegun Obasanjo, and he told us that the African youth must wake up and take action. Do not always wait for the government to give you everything. If you want change, rise and make it happen. I think this advice resonated with me deeply. It reflects our reality in Congo. Then, I think we cannot wait for others to solve our problems. That is the fact. Also, I was inspired by South Korea. After the war, I think the country implemented programs to invest in its own people, especially youth, through education, training, and opportunities. One of notable example is I don't know if it's correct, but I think it's Saimaol Andong. I don't know. It's in Korea. I don't speak Korean. It's Saimaol Audong. In English, it's like New Village Movement. I think this program mobilized young people and communities to rebuild villages, to develop agriculture, and promote self-reliance and cooperation. Today, South Korea is one of the most stable and developed nations in the world, economically, technologically, and industrially. All of this was possible because people, especially youth, who were placed at the center of development and peace. It is in this spirit that we created Synergie des 43. Right after the crisis in Goma in January of this year, to give Congolese youth the tools and opportunities to become real agents of peace and sustainable development. What we do, because we think that peace is not just on paper. I think we can sign 1,000 international agreements, but if nothing changes on the ground, children will continue to live in fear, family will remain traumatized, and young people will lose hope. And on the ground, we do not see numbers of statistics. We see faces, stories, dreams, and sometimes broken lives. But I think if we invest in education, training, and youth empowerment, peace will not remain words on signed document, but it will become a living reality for those who suffer the most and who are the future of this country. This is exactly what Synergie des 43 does. Through our Young Peace Ambassadors programs, we train, we inform, and empower young people living in conflict zones like Goma, Bukavu, Bunia, Beni, and Rutshuru. So they become actors of peace, not just spectators of agreements signed elsewhere. I think also, before discussing gold, minerals, or cross-border trade, let us put youth at the center first. Because an educated, informed, and empowered youth can transform their neighborhood, city, and ultimately the entire country. As Synergie des 43, we think that to make peace tangible, we created a Congolese Young Peace Ambassadors program with the support of UPF, Switzerland, and the DRC. We have some programs, but our pilot target is to train 1,000 youth by January 2026. And we are already launched the second cohort on August this month. And our long-term vision is to train around 1 million youth in the next 5 years. Because we think that if we have more peace builder, we can transform our own country. And those young people become facilitators of dialogue, the mediators, and builder of social cohesion. For example, in Goma, some youth trained in our program in collaboration of UPF have already organized awareness session in schools and neighborhoods and reducing some tension and promoting reconciliation in Goma. And also, we are working about advocacy and international voice. Synergie DSA43 also amplifies the voice of Congolese youth internationally. On June of this year, we held an international peace conference with support of UPS Swaziland and the DRC. We launched an international petition aiming for 10K signatures to support our peace missions. And we conduct advocacy mission with the United Nations, African Union, and others global organizations to defend youth interests and sustainable solution. What are we planning for the future? For the future, we plan to launch an international campaign for peace in Eastern Congo, and also to organize a regional youth conference within the Eastern African community to train real agents of peace and development. Because we think that every youth voice counts. Every action can prevent crisis, restore cohesion, and inspire others. Another things, it's important for the youth, it's the information, the training, and the opportunities. Because we think that youth must have access to information, quality trainings, and economic opportunities to become drivers of change. And Synergie DSA43 has 3 major programs. The first one is scholarships and internships program. Local and international opportunities for talented youth to study or gain experience in Congo or abroad. The second one is to employment opportunities program. We need to creating local and international jobs where the state cannot provide access. That is very more important. And the third is the economic missions program. We need to organizing trips with young entrepreneurs to meet investors, banks, and some financial or economics partners abroad. Let me share with you some example. In Bukavu, youth trained in mediation and entrepreneurship have launched small agricultural projects and creating jobs and strengthening cohesion in their neighborhoods. That is very important things we need to do as a youth. We need to be in the action. We need to be actors of our own lasting peace and our sustainable development. So, this is my conclusion. I think that Congolese youths are not only the future, but they are also the present. And we need to invest in their peace and human values, education and training, economic opportunities, and civic engagement. Because personally, if I'm standing here today, it's because I benefited from opportunities that gave my life direction. Because I received a scholarship from the government of India, which transformed my life. And also, I know that not every young person is born into a family with those opportunities. But together, if we commit ourselves, we can change this reality. We have seen similar access elsewhere, like in Nigeria, with the former president Obasanjo showed how youth entrepreneurship can transform society. With Aliko Dangote, remind us that with vision, persistence, and support, extraordinary results are possible. And if others have done it, so can we. It is up to us, Congolese youth, to take initiative. If we remain passive, no one will lift us from our challenges. But if we act with determination, the right partners and resources will support us. And this is not just for the DRC, but for all African youth across the continent. Young people can build peace, transform communities, and create prosperity if empowered, informed, and committed to act. So thank you for your attention, and thank you very much, Mr. Pierre, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Chris Nyembo. So I was inspired by you mentioning the same old New Village movement in Korea. There's a lot of youth in Africa. We from Canada and the USA and Europe, we see the Youth and Students for Peace, the youth wing of UPF, very active. And we put our hope and our prayers that the youth will rise up and build a new Africa that will, and that maybe out of the ashes of the pain and suffering of 14 decades, as Alfani was saying, can rise up out of the ashes the new hope for Africa. That is our hope. Now I will introduce our respondent, Dr. Edgar Bellow. Edgar Bellow holds a doctorate in business administration and international management from Prescott University, Arizona. He's also earned an MBA in business administration and a master's in public administration in a joint program from the University of Lausanne, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and the Swiss Graduate School of Public Administration. Dr. Bellow has extensive expertise in geopolitics, international management, and crisis and conflict management. He has directed a wide range of urban and city development projects around the world and regularly lectures at leading grandes écoles in France, as well as HEC Geneva and University of Geneva. He's an active member of several international organizations, including Global Asia Institute and the Asia Institute for Management. Today, Dr. Bellow is dedicated to advance higher education and academic research in the fields of geopolitics and conflict management. Welcome, Dr. Bellow.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Pierre Beauregard. It's my pleasure to attend this webinar. And, I learned a lot of things to start to respond to the panelists. I just want to mention a few things, or just one thing. 30 years ago, when this war started, I was in Geneva involved in a diploma called, in that time they did not call it master program, but it was a diploma in development. And I have many friends coming from Zaire in that time, it's called Zaire. And one of them is coming particularly from Goma region, or the eastern part, actually. Then when the war broke up, then I called him. He wanted to actually explain the situation, to making kind of small conferences and explain the situation to all the colleagues. And then I called him. I say, you are stupid. I'm sorry to say that. Why you African, you are fighting, the same country you are fighting. And then afterward, the way he explained to us, he says it's really complicated, Edgar. If I want to, say the whole things in just one word, he say it's really complicated. Of course, he said, anyway, and then again, whenever I have any friends coming from Congo, I still have any contact there today. Same discussion are coming on the, between us, actually. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Alfani and Ambassador Chris Nyembo, to really put two perspectives here, which I really appreciated. First of all, to respond to Dr. Alfani, of course, you mentioned right away in the beginning, the origin of this war should not be seen like, the last decade, or studied it from 30 years, which we are discussing. Are we at a crossroad today? In your presentation, I noticed a lot of things, but what actually, from my intention, is that the role of peace actually should be approached through multi-stakeholders analysis, multi-stakeholder, but also the conflict, how you mentioned, is have a multi-layer level for this. Yeah, I totally agree with you on this point. A conflict is not when it started, or we try to find the beginning of the conflict, but what are the reason? What is at stake actually? What is happening? What is the actors' interest, and all these kind of things? An important point, as you have also religious background, you are teaching theology, or you are involved in this particular aspect as well. When you mention something also important in this conflict, you question religious people. But I think when questioning religious people, right now, it's not the modern religious people or religious people who follow a Belgian king, or emperor, Leopold, I think it's Leopold II, or anyway, following a Belgian king to take over the country. But I'm questioning, when you are speaking, I was questioning, what about the local religions before colonizations? What about this local religion? Did this region, or African people in this particular region, did the local traditional religion, did they really unite before the colonization period? Yes or not? This was my question. Probably we can think about that as well. Yeah. to respond to this particular aspect of religions, I think that religions feed today's war as well, no matter what kind of political consideration or a different aspect we can collect a lot of reason today, but I think religions also is feeding today's war as well. We need to question that. Then the peace, also one of your points we are mentioning, that we need to put all the stakeholders around the table, somehow talking about voiceless, also local population. Of course, I will criticize this particular part that the voiceless local population, of course, they suffer. They go through a lot of things. Did they really have a voice on the peace talking table? I don't think so, particularly. Of course, we can consider them, but did they really have a stake? They are suffering. They don't have actual voice, but they are voiceless anyway. We support them, but the peace actually is really on the multi-stakeholders, those who have different orientations, and somehow. Anyway, we can think about that. Again, another important aspect which you mentioned, which I put it here, is that the peace itself, how can we build that peace? Of course, you mentioned that the countries who are involved, mainly today, Washington and Doha, I mean, United States and Qatar, they have a finance or economic or even industrial consideration in their mind. Actually, they don't care about a local population, voiceless, what we call voiceless population. They don't care about them. But then how actually we can use a finance and economy to as a tools or instrument to set up a lasting peace in this particular region. This is also we need to think about this particular aspect. Mention this, I just remember the case of the end of Vietnam War and Cambodia War, Laos War, this particular aspect. Of course, for peace to be lasting until today, Vietnam is becoming an industrial nation today. Yeah, there was a lot of investment. One of the hugest investment was South Korea, for example, who invested a lot there in order to stabilize politically Vietnam and also the region anyway. You can see it's not enough. The only investment anyway. Yeah, we need to consider that and work on it. And the root cause, like you mentioned, is not dead from 30 years. I agree totally with you. And again, two more points on this in your presentations. Yeah, of course, the trust, which is another question I will ask both of you at the end. The trust between the internal and external actors, actually, which is one of the factors. They don't trust each other, and they don't, there's a lot of, I will not call it conspiracy way of thinking, but they cannot trust each other in the region. But then again, the case of government, so that the government lost its sovereignty, this is a very important point. What we are seeing across the world today, one of the case of Ukraine, losing sovereignty is something not only for population, but for the government itself, losing sovereignty. Government can do everything to recover, to regain this particular sovereignty. You can see in the case you present that government is accusing this terror group, M23, but actually I'm calling terror group. Government is calling that also they violate law, they are terrorists, they are a lot of things, But then again, the other side, Rwanda is saying, no, they are They are not terror. They are also a part of the issue. They are citizens of the country who can really participate in the development. We need to give them also opportunity somehow. Yeah, government is refusing or rejecting any negotiation with the rebel groups, for example. But I think government also have to think about, consider, like you are suggesting, consider the rebel groups and give them opportunity also to regain or to restore a trust between government and this rebel group and the external actors like Rwanda, Uganda, all the other regional actors as well. You say a lot of important things which I have put here because we don't have a time. I will give more time for discussions and also a time for listener, our the audience to question also each one of you, for example. Yeah, I'm coming back to the Ambassador Chris Nyembo presentation, which is quite interesting also. Right away, you mentioned the youth. I did not. Youth are actually a part of the solution for you in this context of war. Yeah, which is actually an interesting statement, but also I can see that through your project. Yeah. And of course, like you mentioned, former president of Nigeria, Obasanjo, which you met, also suggest that you, young people, or the young people, have to rise and, do some action and to act mainly what he is suggesting. And the program also you present to us explain that your effort for this particular situation, but I did not see, or probably we are short of a time. You did not present what is the role actually the youth are doing in this conflict. Probably in your presentation, I can answer this question. You try to give a job to train, to give a scholarship and train these youth to change totally their orientation, which is a good thing if this is the purpose of the Synergy 243. It's a good things you are doing. But again, use as an agent of peace. You mentioned the case of Korea, which actually is really kind of, often I give this example to my students, is a model of peace that why youth have to work to their country or to even to their nation and or to the world also, is to really probably understand the role which they have actually as a citizen, also as a patriot, to develop their own country instead of keeping what I'm calling kind of resentment toward the enemy all the time, to keep war like we are seeing today. As you know, clearly in the region, what I saw, the program I saw on the TV, many young people were involved. They are mobilized, whether they have a gun or they are in a mine, they are mining, working hard sometime. There was a landslide and they die on the hole they are digging, but all these kind of things. But anyway, in your program, it shows also clearly that your focus is to help actually this youth to be concerned about their own land, their own territory, and to develop not only a peace or lasting peace, but to invest in their training, in their education, also which will help them to develop economically their country as well. The case of Bukavu touched me a lot, which is you highlight also here. I want to highlight also this particular point, this agriculture project with the neighborhoods. Why not from this you can create a kind of local economy? I always emphasize a lot local economic issue, which will help a region to develop, and the country can be developed as well. Okay, I will conclude here by saying that Ambassador Chris Nyembo emphasized that the youth are really the hope, not the hope of the future, but of the present. We need to consider the youth. They are the hope of the present and the future for the changing of this region, but not just that region, but for the whole Africa. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Dr. Bellow. So because of our constraint of time here, I will ask you to, I will bring Dr. Alfani and Chris Nyembo on the screen, and we will now have them answer your questions. You will answer each a question. You can ask both the questions right away.
Yeah, I have a two question for you.
Okay.
The first one is the ongoing instability in the eastern of Democratic Republic of Congo. How can actually regional and international partners, which all of you mentioned, work together to foster a climate of mutual trust, again, mutual trust, and economic transparency that address both security and development needs in that region? These are my first question. Second one is, what role should African Union and the East African community and the global partners, in the world, Qatar, US, play in ensuring that peace efforts between DRC and Rwanda, that they can move forward or move beyond a short-term ceasefire to achieve sustainable reconciliations and regional stability? I don't know if you get me.
Sure. Should I go ahead? Thank you so much for these comments, and I really appreciate your insight, highlighting some of the issues that I addressed in my talk. I would like to probably make some comments and then briefly mention the efforts. I have the impression that you were more inviting me to address external actors in relation to the conflict in Congo. I'll address that at the end. I definitely agree that it's important for a lasting peace to include local populations that deal with the issues on a day-to-day life. The second reason why we need to include grassroots and local population is, and including non-state actors, because before the conflict, while the conflict is going on, and after the conflict, most of those actors and populations are on those particular places. Foreigners, external actors, once the conflict gets hotter, they have the option, the exit option. So I really think it's important to invite and facilitate and foster the inclusion of the voiceless that I was mentioning about. Are these actors and populations involved, or do they really want to get involved? My answer is yes. During the colonial era, even before, I think your comments mentioned that there are few actors that attempted to do that, to actually raise and fight against the oppressiveness of King Leopold II, who came with different actors, including religious ones. I will just name some of them. You have Kimpa Vita. She stood against colonial powers. She stood against oppression, and then she gave her life. In fact, her life was taken away while she was fighting against those kind of oppression. You have Simon Kimbangu. I'm actually highlighting only these local religious actors who also fought against oppression. And then, they just had limited resources in order to stand against this oppressive machine, if you want. Kitawala was the other one in the post-colonial era, and so many others that I can actually mention here. Yes, local populations can do something, and they should actually be at the forefront when we are talking about these negotiations. Of course, and I will conclude with this, I think the African Union, Qatar, the United States, and great powers have different interests, and they have interests that sometimes collide or contradict with local interests. Many of those external interests are largely economic. Rare resources, I'm thinking about coltan, gold, uranium, all these rare resources are in those spaces, eastern spaces. And some of these multinationals will use neighboring country to destabilize their own brothers and sisters, neighbors, and so on and so forth. I really think it's a shame that under the Pan-Africanist perspective, to have a neighboring country destabilizing another country. I know that this can be seen as naive, but I really think that we need to stand together as Africans, resolve problem from the African perspective. Why? Because those lands are the lands that our ancestors gave us. Our children, as Ambassador Nyembo was talking about, will still be in those lands. They don't have options. Why do we have these people going to the north, dying on oceans and so on and so forth? It's just because their lands are being taken away, their liberty and freedom are being jeopardized because of local cooptation by foreigners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierre, and thank you, Mr. Bellow. I think that the role of the youth of DRC. I think the first thing we are doing actually is we are looking for a unity, because actually the youth of Congo are separated because of politics, because everything here in Congo is about politics. If you want to work, to have opportunities, you need to work with some political party, or you need to follow some political people. But what we are doing actually is to separate the youth in the politics, and to unite some people, some youth, and together we can now talk about our self-solutions, And I think yesterday I was in some appointment with some very, very intelligent people from Kinshasa. And they are telling me that they are ready to work without the politics, but the system is not very good to work without them. That now what we are doing is to create now like a task force of young people who want to be together and to solve their self problems without the politics. But the political system here in Congo is like a prison for the young people. You can be, yes, of course. You can't go forward without them. Everything is about and around them. But what we are doing actually is to call every good young people who have vision to work for another Congo, because another Congo is possible if we are conscient. In French, if we are conscient, we have a lack of conscience because some people like to dance. Some young people like to dance for the political leaders, But what we are doing now is to help them to understand that we can do more without them. And after that, now we can apply about our programs, our full programs, about the training, about the job opportunities and others opportunities we can create together. But the first thing now, the first problem we have actually is a problem of conscience we have here. But I think that with time we are going to organize some conferences and some events to teach another vision to the young people for our development. Sometimes I like to the South Korean vision about development because they know how to make people or young people in the center of their own development. And I think that if we take the young people in the center of our activities, they will become the true actor of our development. But it's very difficult actually because of the political environment. How can I explain? A political system. But we are doing our best. I think that everything will be very good with the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bellow. I hope you were satisfied with the answers you received.
Yeah, I received a lot of things and I learned a lot also through these presentations. Yeah.
Okay, so we will now conclude our webinar. Thank you for coming to this webinar to understand a little more about the situation in the East Congo and actually the whole of Africa, and we got to see how it's connected to history in all countries. So thank you for coming, and I wish you all a wonderful day.